Drinking life from a fire hose, it seems sometimes. Sound familiar? This is life in the A.S.A.P lane. If you're feeling anxious, stressed, addicted, pressured, you are not alone. In fact, there's a global epidemic of stress and anxiety. Many aren't able to cope without the use of pills, alcohol, food, even retail therapy, shopping. The result is record levels of opioid overdose deaths, obesity levels, and teen suicide attempts. The good news is, there is an exit ramp, and your host, best-selling author, and former U.S. Congressman Alden will guide you to your very own exit. Alden's mission is to help you learn about and adopt strategies and techniques to restore balance and equilibrium to your life. You'll learn from Alden and his guests simple and practical stress-relieving techniques, and you will be inspired by numerous interviews with other people just like you, who have moved from stressed out to charged up, and from misery to mastery. You are cordially invited to join us and learn to live your life in joy and on purpose. Take a deep breath. Let's begin exiting the A.S.A.P lane with Alden.
Hello, everyone. Green Berets and Yoga. Now, those are two words not often seen in the same sentence. But I'm really excited about this particular episode for a number of reasons. As we've discussed in prior episodes, the depth and breadth of the mental and physical health crisis is killing people in record numbers. There's a global epidemic of stress and anxiety. The reported deaths, believe it or not, from combat zones, hurricanes, fires, school shootings, all horrific in their own right, are dwarfed by the casualties from opioids, alcohol, and suicides. The false wizards of pills, alcohol, and binge eating are all being used by those unable to cope with the pace of life today without self-medication. My guest today, that I'm really excited about, is retired Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Jamie Alden. He is the quintessential American warrior and combat veteran in the finest sense of that term. A Green Beret, his 24 years of military service include 4 years as a cadet at West Point, the United States Military Academy. He served as a Special Forces leader during 4 combat tours in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. From 2003 to 2013, in that theater, he is married to another quintessential American warrior and fellow West Point graduate, Alden, who now serves as the Executive Director of Warriors. Hey, Jamie? Jamie.
Yes.
Let me stop just a second.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Green Berets and Yoga, 2 words you don't often see in the same sentence. I'm really excited about this particular episode for a number of reasons. The depth and breadth of the mental and physical health crisis is killing people in record numbers. There's a global epidemic of stress and anxiety. The reported deaths from combat zones, hurricanes, fires, school shootings, all of these are horrific in their own right, but they are dwarfed by the casualties from opioids, alcohol, and suicides. The false wizards of pills, alcohol, and binge eating are all being used by those unable to cope with the pace of life today without self-medication. My guest today that I'm so excited to introduce to you is retired Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Jamie Alden. He is the quintessential American warrior and combat veteran in the finest sense of that term. A Green Beret, his 24 years of military service include 4 years as a cadet at West Point, the United States Military Academy, and he served as a Special Forces leader during 4 combat tours in support of Operation Enduring Freedom Afghanistan from the years 2003 to 2013, a full 10-year span. He's also married, or he is married, I should say, to another quintessential American warrior and fellow West Point graduate, Susan Alden, who now serves as Executive Director of Warriors at Ease, whose mission it is to promote the practice of yoga and meditation among service members, veterans, and their families in order to promote health and healing among their ranks. Jamie, welcome to you, and many thanks for taking the time to be our guest.
Well, Alan, thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be with you today and with your audience. I'm humbled by your kind words. So thank you very much for those. I consider myself fortunate to have served next to the best our nation has to offer. I simply did what I was called to do. And I've benefited greatly because of it. And I want to say that I'm probably the luckiest man on earth because I truly had an exceptional woman 20 years ago, decided to make me her companion for life. So thank you for those kind words about Susan as well. I'd have to give the credit to, yep, yes.
Yes. Well, that please continue.
No, and Susan is the individual that introduced me to meditation and yoga over 20 years ago. So she has made it an integral part of my life, my career, and the profession that I chose to do. And she also makes sure that it remains as a consistent practice on a daily basis for me.
Yes. Well, she certainly is doing great service in her capacity at Warriors at Ease. So, Jamie, to kind of cut right to the chase, so you've seen combat up close and personal, including seeing friends and comrades fall. The fog of war is a term that we hear a lot. Please describe the smoke, the noise, and the chaos that a battle involves, and particularly to the point of today's episode, the mental and emotional challenges this presents to both the commander and to his troops.
No, Alan, sure. I'll do my best, and I think it goes without saying that a combat experience is extremely intimate, and I'm sure that my experience is unique to me and to what situations that I found myself in. I don't claim to have all the answers as we talk about this, about yoga, meditation, and how it affects everyone and supports everyone in a combat experience. But to answer your question, I definitely experienced a fog of war. A chaos of combat is real, and it's something you never really trained for. And every combat situation was different, so I never really grew adept, so to speak, of overcoming it. And this was really the most significant mental and emotional challenge that I had to come to grips with. The realization that I could never overcome the fog of war. I could never defeat the fog of war or really remove the fog of war from being a part of the situation. No matter how much we planned or how much intelligence we had, I was never able to control and predict the combat operation that we were in. And in the beginning, I assumed that if I trained enough and planned enough, then I could control and predict the situation. I thought that if we incorporated enough signals, phase lines, or boundaries, then I would maintain control and therefore be able to react quicker than the enemy. But, as they say, the plans, never survive first contact with the enemy. So the realization that control and predict were flawed from the beginning was difficult for me to accept. And it was this kind of self-awareness which gave me the most challenges trying to overcome the reality that combat is chaotic. Initially,
well, always,
yes.
You and I both have heard that practicing yoga and meditation or mindfulness, to use the umbrella term, does not change the external events that you're dealing with, whether it's in a civilian family situation or trying to deal with the fog of war. Hopefully, it does provide one with a tool to help deal more calmly with what you're facing. So, since you've had to deal with those mental and emotional challenges, could you just elaborate just a little bit about what some of those challenges have been and what you've personally used to deal with them?
Well, yeah, yoga and meditation, it helped me find out, the serenity prayer. It helped me understand. It gave me the wisdom to know the difference between what I can change and what I can't change. And what I realized was that I can change how I am responding to the situation. I can't change the situation. So it was that realization that created an evolve and adapt attitude in how I was responding. I accept the situation for the reality that it was, and I stopped trying to change the situation. And meditation and yoga helped me helped me with that awareness and that mindfulness practice. Fortunate for me, when I entered into first combat situation in 2003, I already had meditation and yoga as a part of my toolkit. I had several teachers along the way. I knew several different meditation techniques. I rest, mindfulness-based stress reduction. I did holotropic breath work. I practiced Bikram yoga, Hatha yoga, Vinyasa yoga. So I had different techniques and strategies that I was able to create and adapt into a personal practice. And when I look at the challenges of war and the trauma that it can create, for me, I realized early on that I chose this profession. So these situations that are happening to me, I have 100% responsibility for that and for them. And so that gave me a sort of peace of that. And not, I didn't look at stress in these situations as bad things. I saw them as both good and bad. It was just an unavoidable fact of combat that I chose to experience. And I'm grateful for those. And I think that mindset kind of inoculated me before I went into those situations. But to answer your question, as a leader, I didn't see this type of response. Obviously, for a decade of combat, off and on, 4 deployments, I didn't see this level of awareness in those that I was to my left and my right, and those which I led. So I spent my career trying to share with individuals the benefits of meditation, the benefits of yoga, the benefits of accepting 100% responsibility, and how those created resiliency that they would be able to take not during the situation, but afterwards, and to turn and transmute the negative trauma that we focus on, and transmute that trauma into a positive experience, in a kind of a gift, so to speak. And you come back from combat, what are the gifts that you've been given? And I've always looked at the combat situation as what it provided to me as a human being, as a leader, and as I go through this journey, this 3D reality of life, what did combat, how did it benefit me, and what lessons am I going to take from those right. Experiences? Right. That's how I've always looked at it.
Okay, were you, when you went in 2003, were you already a commander? Were you commanding others during
yes.
the 10 years?
Yes, every deployment I had, all 4 deployments, I went in as a commander. So I was fortunate in that I didn't have to, all my friends working in Bagram and Kandahar on the staff. I was fortunate that all my deployments, I was outside the wire, so to speak, working with indigenous people. Not every deployment, but the majority of them, working with indigenous people and living, in the villages, eating the food, and really touching and feeling and smelling the reality on the ground. So we weren't removed from that at all during any of my deployments.
Yes. So you and Susan were both cadets at the same time and met at West Point. Were both of you exposed to mindfulness, either meditation or yoga, or both at West Point? You said that she's the one that got you into this. Was she doing this already before, or was this an after West Point, something that you picked up?
And not to tell Susan's story, but to answer your question, she was introduced to yoga and meditation through her mother. So she had the tools before she attended West Point. I didn't have those tools, and what West Point did for me is it introduced me to the Center for Enhanced Performance. And this was 25 years ago. So the center still exists. It has expanded a lot. It's now a major part of the professional and personal development of cadets there at West Point. I mean, they even have a course now, the psychology of elite performance, that's out of the department. But when I was there, I was introduced to focusing techniques, positive affirmation, self-talk and goal setting. Really, it wasn't. It was just introduced because I was a football player So I was a scholar athlete that we had those facilities available to us for visualization and goal setting techniques through the football team.
Yes.
And cadets were also, it was a smaller program there, and other cadets were also given that opportunity. But it's changed a lot over the last 25 years, and a lot of emphasis has been put on visualization and mindfulness techniques, so to speak, but not strictly yoga practice, other than the Cadet Yoga Club that has been around since 2012. So that is a positive sign for the military, specifically the Army, to have that club and bringing more leaders into the Army that have been introduced to yoga and understand the benefits of yoga and meditation practice.
Well, actually, that's a good segue to the next question I was going to ask. So, there are a number of anecdotal stories about mindfulness being employed in the military, both the active military as well as treating trauma survivors. Just how widespread is it being employed in the military, and does it just kind of depend on the individual commander, someone like yourself, and is there exposure to it?
Well, from my experience, special operations, special forces specifically in the Army is a small group, and from my experience, from 1997 to 2017, it was commander dependent, and unfortunately for me, I didn't have a commander throughout my career that emphasized meditation or yoga. We would talk about goal setting or maybe visualization, maybe during officer professional development section for a couple of minutes, but most of that was something that I brought as a commander, that I brought into my specific units. But how you introduced it, you had to be very sensitive on how you introduced it because of maybe the resistance that you would come across initially. So the way I introduced it was through self practice and kind of modeling the behavior, and created an opportunity for others to approach me and kind of ask me, "Hey, sir, what is that? What are you doing? Why do you meditate every day, or why are you in the weight room doing these stretches?" So they would come up to me on a one-on-one basis, and we would have a discussion. We would talk about mindfulness. We would talk about focus, attention. We would talk about breathing, and I would do my best to kind of help them come to the realization that the breathing techniques they already knew. There were things that they naturally did that would benefit them, and they could apply to other parts of the combat situation or to their level of preparedness. And one-on-one, I would get a positive feedback, and I would assure them that their secret was safe with me. And but as a group, there was more resistance as a group.
And
I think, yeah.
Is it kind of the normal resistance that you hear from men that, hey, this is not macho enough? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, it was maybe a fear of that they would be transitioned into a yoga pant wearing hippie. And it didn't help us any when the movie or the information came out. The movie, I think it was 2009, Men Who Stare at Goats came out. And it was focused on special forces and kind of the
right.
Unconventional way to prepare and to operate. So that didn't help us out any, because guys would always remind me of that. I'm not staring at any goats. No. We're just talking about stretching. We're talking about maintaining the body, right. because what I found was yoga for me was when there's pain in the body and the feet and the legs and the back and the lower back, your focus is on that pain. And what yoga did for me is yoga minimized and at times eliminated that pain. So it allowed me to physically function and not focus on the pain that I was feeling, or the creakiness, if I can use that word.
Right.
But it freed my mind to then focus on the situation. And it wasn't cluttered with my back was hurting or my feet were hurting. It was right. focused on what are the stimuli that are coming to me at this moment? What are stimuli is useful that I've learned through my training? And then what do I need to do to act and respond? And that's, for me, that was a combination of how yoga and meditation kind of complement each other in a whole mindfulness
Yes.
practice.
Well, could you, as you know, the Walter Reed Research Institute has done some interesting work in this area with regard to their findings on how impactful mindfulness can be in the military. Could you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, just a little bit of what I know about it. This is really in Susan's realm, the research aspect of it. But I know that we have a friend of ours, Colonel Tahan, who is now the commander of the Walter Reed Army Institute for Research. And it was a relationship that was built out here in Hawaii between her and Susan. And she was a critical partner of Warriors at Ease and what Susan does out here in Hawaii and also nationally. So I think the evidence-based research, the sample size is really small, but I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction in that evidence-based research and getting more and doing more research. The National Research Action Plan, the Department of Defense, the Veteran Affairs, and the Health and Human Services, back in 2013, you directed all the federal agencies to take a look at it and to prevent mental health. So I think that was maybe the catalyst for the research that's coming out now, and I think there's a bright future for the institution to show the evidence, do the studies, and then once that's happened, I think then we'll be able to really incorporate it into the larger Department of Defense and the active duty units.
Back to your previous comment about your ability to focus on the situation at hand rather than your feet hurting, your back hurting. Just from reading, one of their findings is that it does reduce mind wandering and it focuses the attention of the soldier during high stress training, assist in the treatment of insomnia, also substance abuse disorders, improves emotional regulation, sleep quality, physical performance and work performance. And also, needless to say, I know Walter Reed is using it a lot to deal with trauma survivors and depression and alcohol use in the post-military life of so many of their patients. So they're doing some great work just from what I read there. Talk a little bit about, we've mentioned Susan 2 or 3 times. You all are playing very important high-profile roles in your post-active duty lives. Please describe in more detail a little bit of what the 2 of you are doing and what led both of you to decide on this career path.
Well, I think kind of I could answer the first, unpack the last one first. We decided this career path kind of chose us. I think we've both been called to serve, and this is just kind of the next chapter of that service to the military community, families, and really to the community. So Susan is taking the lead on this. She's as the executive director for global nonprofit Warriors at Ease. It's a growing network. It has 950 plus teachers. They impact about 16,000 individuals a year. It's based on sharing trauma-sensitive, military-informed yoga practice for certified yoga instructors. And what Warriors at Ease does is it'll take a certified yoga instructor who is called to support the veteran community and want to support veterans and their families. And they provide them with additional training to augment their already kind of in-depth understanding of yoga through military-focused, military-informed, as they call it, training. So they kind of understand the military, the difference between the military and the different services within the military based on the military community that they're working in, how to work with soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that have post-traumatic stress disorder, that have been victims of military sexual trauma, and even even amputees, and how to adjust the yoga practice to fit their needs. That Susan and myself are trying to be the bridge. So to put in simple terms, really the bridge between the yoga meditation world and the military, and continue to be kind of the translator between the two.
Yes.
The translator. Sorry about that. The translator between the two to help them better understand each other. I think it all starts with an enhanced and an increased understanding, and as we understand each other, we begin to trust one another, and then we can really begin to heal uh, our the veterans, and also inoculate the current warriors, so they have the skills similar to the way I had the skills before they get into the combat situation, and so it's more of a preventive practice than a treatment.
Right. Well, I thought just a little bit off topic, since we mentioned Susan 2 or 3 times. I was telling her in an earlier phone call about one of the proudest moments of my time in the U.S. Congress was being a co-sponsor of the bill that allowed and required the service academies to admit women. Now, that was way back in 1976. And so I think, was it around 1996 would have been her first year there or something like that. I know she was still a cadet at that time. And so I was telling her about all the resistance to the legislation. Now, that was 20 years before the two of you got to West Point, and she was laughing and saying, yes, she was getting ready to lead the charge out onto the football field, I guess, for one of the games you were playing in. And she had an older cadet on a veteran of West Point on a walking cane who looked at her and actually spit on her shoes and said, "You don't belong here. What are you doing here?" or words to that effect. So the resistance, I guess, lasted long after the first cadets were admitted, first women cadets. So that was.
Well, I think that's a true story.
Yeah.
To correct the record, I wasn't going to play in that game. I only played on the football team for my freshman year. Then after that, I decided I wanted to graduate. So I had to focus a little bit more on academics. But that story is a true story, as Susan tells it, and it's
right.
It takes time. It takes generations and of understanding, but there's been a lot of progress, as you know. There's been a lot of progress, and the military has been on the leading edge of a lot of the social transitions and that we see in our nation, throughout history. So I think as we bring in yoga and meditation into a holistic performance enhancement in the military, I think we'll see an adoption of the practices more in the Western male psyche, maybe as a possibility.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a good segue to the final question I wanted to cover. We've already talked a little bit about the resistance that many men have to yoga, and I know you were an athlete, and you said you played your freshman year, and I'm sure you must have played and done very well in high schools. And I know you told me you're a big fan of the NFL. As you know, many of the recent Super Bowl winning teams and the individuals have added mindfulness to the bigger, better, faster, stronger ethos that's always ruled coaches and teams. And I think this would appear to be becoming the competitive edge for many of these top performers. These athletes are living for the first time in the social media age, where they not only have to perform well on Sunday, but they have to deal with all the internet trolls and talk radio and television the other 6 days of the week. So I'm hopeful, and I know you are, that when we communicate more and more to the wider audience of men about the increasing use among the military and first responders and football players, the men will finally get the message, this is macho enough for me to do. So any comments you make on that topic?
There's a lot of room for improvement, and I think, but there are those great signs of how it is meditation and visualization and mindfulness are given the competitive edge to the professional athlete. And yeah, I agree that it seems like those teams that incorporate that practice are able really. I think what they're able to do is they're able to maintain a calm or steadiness as with the ups and downs of the competition, because a competition never goes as planned, just like a combat situation never goes as planned. The plan only survives first contact with the enemy, and I think as a former quarterback, the play only survives first snap, and being able to adjust and adapt and evolve as a situation is developing. The best way to do that is not through lifting weights, and it's good to have lifted weights, and the faster you are, the more it can make up for your inability to think. But running the option at West Point, it was we knew that we didn't have the best athletes in the nation, but we knew we were tough, and we knew that if we could think and adapt and adjust to what the defense was showing us, they could never be right. And so it really helped us, and it's helping the Army team today. They're doing really well, and so we're proud of what they're doing and how they brought the option back. And Coach Mumpkin has really got a great team there. So yeah, I am a big NFL football fan. I think it's I think that it is the quintessential reality TV show, and seeing how everything works out in the different personalities, and having a really good friend of mine, Bennett, was in the NFL for 13 seasons, and kind of getting a kind of a behind the camera look at situations in locker rooms and different coaches and different strategies and different leadership techniques has been beneficial to me in kind of understanding, what are the different techniques that are out there, and what are different leaders doing to motivate and to enhance the capabilities of their players. And I've adopted some of that through my military career, about motivation and about ways to gain that competitive edge and focus and attention and breathing. That's what it really all came back to was, football is about blocking and tackling. It's doing the simple things to perfection. And that's exactly what Special Forces prides itself in, is doing the simple things to perfection. And so much so that you can train it to an indigenous force that can then, we are then able to leverage their capabilities to achieve our missions. So,
right.
So I think there's a bright future for meditation and yoga and really mindfulness. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome, but those hurdles I think are overcome with the research and with the results, and with more individuals talking about it, really more men talking about kind of how it benefited them, and how they use it in their daily practice.
Right.
It's got to be a grassroots movement. I think, and the movement has been going on for some time, as you well know.
Yes. Okay, Jamie. Well, great. In closing, I want to thank you again so much for taking the time to be my guest, and especially for sharing your incredible life story. There truly is magic in mindfulness, and I'm not referring to David Copperfield or Mandrake magic, pulling rabbits out of hats. As we discussed, there's a lot of science and evidence behind all this, and this managing stress and anxiety is our single biggest mental and physical health challenge at both the national and the personal level. So to both you and Susan, many thanks for the great contribution you both are making in this very important area. And to our listeners, I hope you have enjoyed this, and I hope you've learned from it, and we will see you next episode. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Allen, thank you. It was an honor and pleasure to discuss meditation and yoga with you today. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay.